Welcome back, listeners. Ready for another deep dive?
Always.
Okay, good, good. Today, we're tackling something that, well, it might make you look at anxiety a little differently.
Yeah, this one really kind of turns things upside down.
Right. Okay, so we're digging into this neuroscience news article. It's all about some really interesting findings that are going to be published in the Journal of Neuroscience. You know, the big one.
Yeah, that's a pretty reputable source.
It is. So the headline is, Cerebellar Serotonin acts as a brake to reduce anxiety. Now, that's already got my attention, right? Because usually when we think serotonin, we think, like, happy mood, less anxiety.
Right, right. It's often called the feel-good neurotransmitter.
Exactly. So what's the deal here? Is everything we thought wrong?
Well, not exactly. This research is saying it's not just about, like, the total amount of serotonin you have. It's more about where in the brain it's doing its thing.
Okay. Yeah, I'm listening.
So we're talking about the cerebellum here. You remember that part of the brain? Way back there.
Yeah. Isn't that the, like, balance and coordination center?
Right. The classic example is like riding a bike. All those smooth movements, that's the cerebellum at work.
Okay, but anxiety, I always thought that was happening, like, somewhere else in the brain.
Right. For a long time, we thought the cerebellum was pretty much all about motor control. But what's really cool is that scientists are starting to realize it plays a role in emotions and thinking, too.
Hold on. So the cerebellum's got, like, a secret life, a hidden superpower or something?
Kind of. And this study suggests that if someone's struggling with anxiety, it might actually be because of how serotonin is working in their cerebellum, specifically.
Whoa. Okay, so how did they figure that out?
Well, they did these experiments with mice, and get this, they were able to actually control the anxiety levels in these mice by messing with the amount of serotonin in the cerebellum.
Seriously. They could just, like, turn the anxiety up and down.
Pretty much. Increased the serotonin, anxiety went down. Decreased it, anxiety went up. It's called bidirectional control.
That's wild. And that's important because...
It's huge. It means we might be able to develop treatments that are, like, super targeted. Instead of affecting the whole brain, we could zero in on the cerebellum and maybe get better results with fewer side effects.
So instead of just, like, trying to boost serotonin everywhere, which can cause, you know, those side effects you mentioned,
right,
we could go straight to the source. Clever.
Exactly. And that could mean more effective treatment for anxiety disorders. It's a really exciting possibility.
Okay, I am definitely intrigued. So tell me more. How would that even work? What would these future treatments look like?
Well, it's still early days, but there are a few different ideas being tossed around.
Like what?
Well, maybe new medications that specifically latch on to serotonin receptors in the cerebellum. Or there's been some talk about non-invasive brain stimulation techniques, you know, ways to kind of nudge the activity in that region.
It's like a little brain zap to calm the anxiety.
In a way,
Yeah.
yeah. But it's more nuanced than that. This research opens up a lot of new avenues to explore.
It's like a whole new world of possibilities. But hold on, this was all done in mice, right?
Yeah.
So how do we know for sure that it'll work the same way in humans?
That's the million-dollar question. You know, mice and humans, we share a lot of similarities in how our brains work, but there are definitely differences too. So this study is a huge step forward, don't get me wrong, but...
We'll get to be cautious.
Exactly. We need to see these findings replicated in humans before we get too excited about new treatments.
So it's promising, for
Yeah.
sure, but we're not quite there yet.
Not quite. More research is definitely needed.
Okay, I get it.
Yeah.
So just to recap, what we've learned today is that the cerebellum, which we always thought of as the movement part of the brain, might actually be a big player in how we experience anxiety.
Exactly. And it's all about how serotonin is working within the cerebellum, not just overall levels in the brain.
Right. It's all about location, 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 like real estate.
Haha, yeah, kind of. It's a great example of how, you know, neuroscience is constantly pushing forward, changing what we thought we knew.
It makes you wonder if the cerebellum is involved in more than just movement. What else might it be doing? Like, could it play a role in other emotions or even, I don't know, things like decision-making or creativity? I mean, who knows?
Those are fantastic questions. And to be honest, those are exactly the kinds of things that scientists are starting to look into.
Really?
Yeah. There's more and more evidence suggesting that the cerebellum might be involved in a much wider range of functions than we ever imagined.
This is blowing my mind. So today's deep dive wasn't just about anxiety in the cerebellum. It's also about realizing that we still have so much to learn about the brain and how it works.
Absolutely. And with each new discovery, we open up new possibilities for understanding ourselves and maybe even for developing better treatments for all sorts of mental health challenges.
I'm ready for more, but I guess we got to say that for next time.
It's really fascinating when you think about it, like all those physical symptoms you get when you're anxious.
Oh, yeah. Racing heart, tense muscles, that kind of thing.
Exactly. And you know what? The cerebellum's involved in regulating all of that.
Never thought about it that way.
Yeah.
So maybe the cerebellum isn't just processing the emotions themselves, it's also coordinating those physical reactions.
Right. It's like this whole mind-body connection thing. But it's not just acting alone. The cerebellum's always talking to other parts of the brain, like the amygdala. That's the fear center, right?
Yeah, I've heard of that one.
And the hippocampus, which is all about memory. So they all work together to create that whole anxiety experience.
A whole anxiety team working hard.
In a way, yeah. And it goes even further than the brain itself. The cerebellum also connects to the autonomic nervous system, which controls all those automatic things like breathing and heart rate.
Right, yeah.
So when you get that adrenaline rush when you're anxious, that's partly the cerebellum's doing.
Wow. Okay, I'm really starting to see how the cerebellum is way more than just a movement center. It's like a central hub for both our physical and emotional responses.
That's a great way to put it. And that understanding has some big implications for how we think about treating anxiety.
Oh, I bet. Does this mean we need to, like, totally rethink how we're treating anxiety now?
It definitely suggests that we should consider a more holistic approach. You know, medications that target serotonin levels in the whole brain, they can be helpful for some people for sure. But this research suggests that maybe focusing specifically on the cerebellum could be even better.
So, like, instead of just medication, maybe we should be looking at things that address the mind-body connection too, like mindfulness or biofeedback.
Exactly. Those types of therapies can help people learn to control their physical responses to stress and anxiety, and that could directly impact the cerebellum and how it's working in those brain circuits.
So calming our bodies can actually rewire our brains. That's wild.
It really is.
This deep dive has given me a whole new perspective on anxiety, that's for sure. I feel like I understand it so much better now.
That's great to hear. And I think the main takeaway here is that we need to stop thinking of the brain as a bunch of separate parts, you know? It's all connected.
It's like it's all one big system working together.
Exactly. And that makes the brain super adaptable and resilient. Even if one part isn't working quite right, there's still potential for change and healing.
That's encouraging to hear. But I'm curious, if this changes how we think about treating anxiety, does it also change how we understand other mental health conditions? Could the cerebellum be involved in things like depression or even something more complex like schizophrenia?
Great question. And yeah, researchers are definitely starting to look into that. This study was all about anxiety, but there's a lot of interest in the cerebellum's role in all sorts of mental health issues.
So this deep dive wasn't just about serotonin and the cerebellum. It's also a reminder that we still have so much to learn about the brain.
Oh, for sure. And every new discovery opens up all these new possibilities, new ways to understand ourselves, and maybe even come up with more effective treatments.
I'm already excited about what they discover next. But let's bring it back to this research for a second. You mentioned earlier that the next step is to try to replicate these findings in humans. What would that actually look like?
Well, there are a few ways to study brain activity in people. One that's pretty common is fMRI, functional magnetic resonance imaging. It basically lets us see which parts of the brain are active during different tasks or experiences.
So they could use fMRI to see if the cerebellum lights up when someone's feeling anxious.
Yep. And they could also see how activity in the cerebellum changes when someone's getting treatment, like medication or therapy.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But fMRI is just one tool, right? Are there other ways to study this in humans?
Oh, yeah. There's TMS, transcranial magnetic stimulation. That's a non-invasive technique that uses magnetic pulses to either stimulate or quiet down activity in certain brain areas.
So they could like aim it at the cerebellum and see if it changes someone's anxiety level.
Exactly. And they could use it to study the connections between the cerebellum and other parts of the brain that are involved in anxiety.
Okay, that's really helpful. I'm getting a much clearer picture of where this research could go from here. But what about the ethical side of things? Is it safe to be messing with people's brains like that, even if it's non-invasive?
That's a really important point. Any research that involves humans has to go through a very thorough ethical review process, to make sure it's safe for the participants.
So it's a balancing act. We want to learn more, but we got to do it responsibly.
Exactly. It's an ongoing conversation between scientists, ethicists, and the public.
Okay, good to know. So we've covered a lot in this deep dive. We talked about the mouse study, what it could mean for anxiety treatment, and even the ethical stuff. But I'm going to zoom out for a minute. What does this research tell us about the brain in general? Like about who we are?
I think the biggest takeaway is that the brain is way more complex and interconnected than we ever realized. We're moving away from this idea that the brain is just a bunch of separate compartments. It's all one big intertwined system.
It's like one big, beautiful mess.
Yeah. And it's a system that's always evolving, changing based on our experiences, our genes, and the world around us.
It's kind of humbling to think about how adaptable our brains really are.
It really is. And this new understanding of the brain gives me a lot of hope for the future of mental health treatment.
Me too.
Yeah,
But let's not get ahead of ourselves. We still have so much to learn.
definitely. But that's what makes science so exciting, right? Every new discovery leads to new questions and new possibilities.
I can't wait to see what's next. But for now, I think we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We have, and I hope you've gained a new appreciation for just how amazing the human brain is.
I know I have. And for our listeners, remember, this is just the start. Keep learning, keep asking questions, and stay curious about the world inside your own head. It's funny. We started this deep dive laser focused on just this one study, about serotonin and the cerebellum. But I feel like we've gone so much broader now. It's like we zoomed out and got this bigger picture view of how the whole brain works, how connected it all is.
It's true. That's how science works, though, right? One discovery, and suddenly you're down this rabbit hole of new questions, new connections. And here, it's making us completely rethink what we thought we knew about the cerebellum.
Right. It's like for so long we thought of it as this like separate area tucked away in the back, mostly just handling movement. But now, because of this research and a bunch of other studies, we're seeing it does so much more.
It's like we found this hidden control center in there, affecting not just our movements, but our feelings, our thoughts, even how we interact with other people.
Okay, so for everyone listening, picture this. Think of your brain like a city, right? A busy city. The cerebellum isn't just the traffic cop directing cars anymore. It's more like this central command coordinating everything. The transportation, the communication networks, even like the emergency response systems.
That's such a great way to put it. It really captures all the different roles the cerebellum plays, and it helps to understand why, when something goes wrong there, it can cause so many problems, not just the movement stuff.
Exactly. I was actually reading about some studies that suggest the cerebellum might even be involved in language processing and social skills. It just blows my mind. So if that's true, what does it mean for people with cerebellar damage?
Well, it definitely raises some big questions. See, for a long time, we thought damage to the cerebellum mostly just caused those movement problems. Trouble with coordination, balance, that kind of thing. But if it's involved in all these higher level functions too, then damage could mean a lot of other challenges. Cognitive stuff, social stuff, you name it.
So it's not just about physical therapy anymore. We might need to think about completely different approaches to treatment.
Absolutely. And this is why we need more research in this area. The more we can learn about everything the cerebellum does, the better we can help people who have any kind of issue related to it.
Okay, this is where I start to get really excited. If we're just scratching the surface of what the cerebellum can do, imagine all the other things we might discover about the brain. This one study totally changed how we think about anxiety. Who knows what other breakthroughs are out there?
I know, the possibilities are endless, and every new discovery opens up this whole world of new questions and potential solutions. That's what I love about neuroscience. We're always pushing the boundaries, learning more about what makes us human.
This deep dive has definitely left me with way more questions than answers. But that's a good thing, right? It sparked this curiosity, this sense of wonder, and I hope our listeners feel that too.
I hope so. The more we question, the more we explore, the closer we get to understanding the full potential of the human brain.
And that's what the deep dive is all about. We don't just want to give you information. We want you to think differently, to question everything, to never lose that curiosity.
Well said. The journey of discovery never really ends. And the more we embrace that journey, the more fulfilling our lives become.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the incredible world of the cerebellum, serotonin, and anxiety. We hope you've learned something new today, and more importantly, that you're inspired to keep exploring that amazing universe that's inside your own mind.
Keep those neurons firing, everyone, and never stop asking questions. We'll see you next time.